First of all, I think y'all know me, Matt Baum, CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. As you can see by my background, we have RevOps AF happening in May 2025 in New Orleans. And for anybody who wants to get together with 300 plus of your RevOps friends for some content and sessions, along with some incredible offsite experiences like float building and a tour of Mardi Gras World, and like a scavenger hunt across the city and all this other great stuff that we got planned. Check it out, revopsaf.revopscoop.com. And you can also join our community for free. I'll throw some links in there. So that's a little bit about me, but I also want to do just a quick introduction and then one kind of question for panelists here. So I have Nik Mijic, who is the co-founder and CEO at Matik. I have Emily Christine, who is the operations manager of CS at Mountain, and Melissa Allen, who is the director of CS Ops at Okta. Let's first talk a little bit about CS team data enablement. So the first topic that we're going to be getting into is why. First, why? Like, why is this important for CS teams to be enabled on data? And I think, Emily, you're going to kick us off and get us started here.
Yeah. So before you ever get into like data or anything like that, for me, it's always really important to remember that like, why do we have CSMs and why do we have CS, and like, where is their greatest strength and what is it that even makes them successful? And for me, that was always like the number one thing is that they have to be the people who your customers trust. That is absolutely, you've got to be building empathy, building a relationship. That's always the first thing we teach CSMs that they need to be able to do. And I always think back to, I was actually in support in CS and in a customer facing role before I ever moved into ops. And for me, the story I always go back to whenever I'm working on enablement now is being on a QBR with a customer who loved me. We had like a 1.5 year long relationship. They were very successful. All of our QBRs always went well. And I put up some metric and there was this immediate like awkwardness. And they were like, we don't really agree with that. I don't know where you're getting this from, but I don't think that's actually right information. Immediately, I like panic on the call because I have recommendations further in the QBR that are based on that data. I'm full panic. And even though later I ended up finding out, oh no, the number was right, I was explaining that metric incorrectly. I was giving the wrong definition for that data. And even when I explained that to the client, I noticed that from then on, QBRs, they did almost out of politeness to me. They like weren't really engaged. You could tell that they didn't really buy into, was I an expert anymore? They didn't really trust me anymore. And as a CSM, that was incredibly frustrating. So for me, enablement is huge. I don't really ever roll out anything without a very formal plan, even if it is a low lift for enablement. I'm always owning it. It's incredibly important to me because to me, misunderstood data is the same as bad data, and bad data is like the worst possible thing you could ever hand off to a CS team as an ops person. So to me, if your CS team doesn't understand what the data is that you are giving them, why you put it in the deck, why they're presenting it to a customer at a certain point in their life cycle, then honestly, it's almost like, what is the point? Why did you give this to them? Because you're just going to be eroding that trust that they've built with the customer.
I think one other thing that I'll add to that as well is I think data is the currency. It's like how we make decisions, right? At the end of the day, whether it's internal, whether it's external, data is king, and that's the new currency. And the way we speak about value and ROI in today's world has to be tied back to data. And since customer success teams are working directly with customers to prove value and ROI, they need to have the ability to understand, one, what the data is, and two, the ability to articulate that and tying that back to the objectives that the customers have. So I would argue it's like a really crucial part of just customer success in general, just being able to speak to data and making sure that people have a good understanding of that.
Yeah, and I would just completely plus one to that on both of you guys. But to what Emily was saying, the credibility, you lose that credibility if you can't actually articulate the story of what the data is showing them. And to what Nik was saying with the internal and external, if you are not understanding it internally, then you're telling the wrong story and you don't know which path to then direct your customer. If you're customer facing and actually going over something and you lose that credibility because you don't actually know what the story is and you're taking them down the wrong path where they should go next, then yeah, how are they really going to trust you? How are you going to trust you? You're going to be second guessing yourself every time. So making sure that they are enabled on both the internal and external, and they feel super confident in that to be that partner for their customers as they're talking them through things it's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, nothing can erode the trust more. And I think Emily felt that when you were describing your story, right? You have a great relationship with someone, but again, that can be stripped away pretty quickly if you're presenting things that ultimately do not line up for them. And so we got this understanding now of why it's important. Let's go on the next to the how. So how do you know if the team has been effectively enabled, and how do you even identify where enablement is needed and really prioritize that? Nik, I think you're going to get us started on this one.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, you have to take a step back to understand what the goals and objectives are of your organization overall, as well as your team, right? So I'll give an example. If a big focus is renewals and driving expansions upon the renewal, and that is the KPI that the team is really pushing this quarter or next quarter for the year, then that is obviously an area in which you need to make sure that the team is enabled to be able to speak. So I think prioritization really depends on what your objectives are as a group. I love frameworks. So the way that I figure out what way to prioritize is I look at kind of two axes. I look at one axis is like the size of prize, right? If we go and do something, what is the impact that this is going to have? And then the other axis is level of effort, right? And ideally, we're doing things that are in that magic quadrant of low level of effort, but are going to have an outsized impact on our KPIs. And that is the way that we prioritize, and something that is a tool that I've used in the past that's worked really well.
I think back to Nik was saying, you've really got to, what are you trying to do? Obviously, if you've got certain KPIs, or maybe you have new data elements that you want to make sure the team understands. What we've done before at Okta is we actually have these pitch contests where like something new has been rolled out. We really want to make sure that they've really absorbed the information. And so we make them do these like pitch contests where they win cool prizes, and you get to see how other people are delivering the story, the data story. And it gets people really involved and really energetic and really excited about it. And you actually also get to see how other people interpret it. And that's a way to, for us, like something really big, right? Something that's a larger type of data element, to really know that, okay, they get it. They've gotten to listen to other people. So I think depending on the level of what's happening, or the level of new data being introduced, there's different levels of how you can make sure that they've been effectively enabled. I would say a pitch contest might be at a large spectrum, but that definitely gives a really good gauge of, did they really absorb that information, and then can they tell that story back?
Yeah, and I think, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna, before you chime in, Emily, I guess one question is we're we're talking about the enablement aspect. I think we brought up the business review side of things, and maybe Emily, you can start here and then get into the point you were gonna get at. But I was curious, like when it comes to the business review itself, obviously there's data pieces in there. There's probably a lot of qualitative, maybe non-data pieces in there, at least as it relates to, again, Mountain and Okta. How do you all have, is there a templated QBR process? Who's responsible for creating that, spinning that up? Where does the ops team play versus the CS team play in that? Just curious on what that process looks like, because I can imagine it probably being different at every company and every organization.
Yeah, it is different at every organization, although I work very hard because I've had a lot of success with me being the owner of that. And I do think that is because I've been a CSM, I've run QBRs, I understand what that feels like. I do not know how many hours worth of QBR calls of other CSMs in my career. But for me, we always used, at both of my last companies, we leveraged Matik. Not here to say that you have to use the tool, but that is what we used. And so I was very specific about nobody had edit access to a deck other than me, even leaders, because we all know leaders are wonderful, but they are going to break things if you give them access.
They're the worst. They're the worst culprits.
And yeah, I fully own that, both from a like, how is it presented? Order of slides is incredibly important to me. I also have a storytelling background. And so for me, it is the number of times that I have seen CSMs rearrange slides because they didn't understand that doesn't make any sense. Why would you explain your recommendations and then go into metrics? Show your metrics and use them to drive why you are now making certain strategic recommendations. So yeah, for me, it's always been that I own the slides. I've always been highly recommend that you have an extremely good relationship with whoever your primary CS leader stakeholder is. At Mountain, we have 3 of them. At previous organizations, it's always been the VP of customer success or something like that. And be a strategic partner to them, but also what are they telling you? They are going to be leaders who are incredibly good at CS and are really good at managing those calls, building out that story, and bringing all of that together. And then I think the last piece is also making sure that you understand the story that product's trying to tell. You're always going back to that North Star metric. You're making sure that you are fully aligned and understanding what is the overall story that the company is even trying to sell or tell. So yeah, I think that's how I manage the deck itself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. Melissa, anything to add to that?
Honestly, super similar, Emily, except potentially I'm not necessarily the person owning it, but what we found is a couple years ago, there was just a huge need to help save CSM's time and to make things more consistent. And everybody was doing a different weird QBR and MBR and had different slides and different formatting and different branding. And we're like, we need to get a handle on this. This is just a little all over the place. And then in walks our alignment with Matik. And we have a digital growth team that does service our more digitally covered customers, less of the CSM specific covered customers. But there's a couple awesome people on that team that have also branched out to be like an automated team that basically owns Matik and keeps those decks very similar to basically there's 1 or 2 people, Emily, that do what you were saying, and they own those decks specifically. They keep them consistent. They keep them branded correctly. They try to tell the right story. Now, you can only control so much, right? Because once the CSM has it, they're probably going to reorder to some extent. But the nice part is you can build in all this optimization of depending on what kind of customer you are and what kind of industry and what kind of products they own, you can then populate certain slides that really truly matter, branded the correct way and making sure it's telling the story in the way that should be told and adding value and showing the value that Okta or whatever company, right, brings to the customer. By having kind of a team owning that and owning that standardization, still letting it be customizable per customer. And obviously the CSM, whoever can add to it, but having that baseline of a good story and good branding and good data to tell the right story of the business value that the customers are getting. I think that's huge. You've really got to keep it consistent to make sure that you're telling a similar value story to the customers. That way you're giving the same level of service.
One other thing that I'll just add is I think in order to scale, you do need to templatize, and you can't be doing bespoke things for every single customer, especially as you scale as an organization. You start getting more and more customers. I think there is something, and I always say a rule of 80-20, right? Like when you do templatize, you want it to be something that is applicable to majority of your customer base, whether that is a business review, whether that's a renewal conversation, whether that's a checkpoint, onboarding. You want to, and I think this is where there is control, to Emily's point, where, hey, you know what good looks like and you want to enable the team on that. But I also think that there are feedback loops that I think are really important to drive home with the CSMs and the people that are delivering these presentations, where if there is something that they're doing bespoke on a consistent basis, or if there's things that they're hearing from customers that they're presenting, right? Those are really great qualitative pieces of feedback that can be turned into changes to narratives and templates that you have that will hopefully drive a lot more value to your customer base.
Yeah, and I always think back or think too, we're talking about enablement and CS enablement, data enablement, right? But just think if your company allowed your sales team to do the things that in a pre-enablement world, that we're talking about with your CS team right now. What if you hired a new salesperson and you were like, oh yeah, we don't have a deck, just go out and create one and do whatever you want? That shit's not going to fly. No one's going to allow for that, right? Why don't we apply the same sort of just rigor and process, right? When it comes to customer success and enablement there as we do on the sales side and the pre-customer side, right? And maybe one last thing for you all before we wrap this one up. is how do you measure then outcomes or know what success looks like on the enablement side? Nik, you just gave one example. Hey, if you're like 80/20, like you're going to have some changes that will inevitably be made, but also if you're seeing bespoke things happen on a consistent basis, then maybe you need to actually change your process. But how do you measure success? What are the outcomes that you look at when it comes to enablement?
I think just like anything, whether you're building product, whether you're building a process, whether you're doing enablement, there needs to be some sort of metric that you hold yourself accountable to. And I think part of that could just be adoption. So if I'm rolling out a new business review template, or if I'm rolling out a new one pager that I want the team to adopt, part of that is I'm just going to see like how often is this being used, and how not just how many times they're using it, but how frequently they're using it. So that's more the quantitative side that you can see. And ideally, you're then tying that back to the original question of why. If our goal is to improve renewal rates, or our goal is to reduce churn or increase expansion, ideally, by doing this type of enablement, it should lather up to those objectives that you have as an organization, and you're moving the needle on those particular KPIs. I would say that there's a secondary bucket, which is a little bit more like qualitative, which is, hey, Melissa, I noticed you haven't been using it, or hey, I've noticed you have been using it. Tell me why. Let me get a better understanding of what's going on. And I think there's a lot of tools out there, right, that have made things easier to get those feedback loops, whether it's using a gong or like listening to calls. I think it's a really effective way to see how effective the enablement is that you've done with the group. And when you watch them deliver this data and you deliver this insights with customers, you can see firsthand examples of whether or not the enablement has translated into the field.
Yeah, I think there's your basic enablement tools that you can see. Have people been watching the high spot videos? Has somebody actually taken the training? Are they utilizing the Matik decks? Are we getting input on like a gong integration? You've got like those kind of metrics, but also the feedback loop that like Nik was alluding to, right? Like we have a Slack channel about our automation stuff, and people, because they're constantly, hey, it'd be great if I had this deck, or hey, something's wrong with this. That even people saying something isn't working correctly means that they're in it. I didn't realize we had an error with a Chrome plugin for Gainsight, and I didn't think anybody was using this sucker until we got everybody complaining about how it wasn't working. So it was like, wow, people actually really use it. So it's even if something's wrong, or if something's not working, or if they want to add something, they're invested because they're asking about it. They want it to be fixed, or they want adjustments. So you've got that kind of aspect as well. And then I really love, Nik, how you made that comment of ultimately this stuff is to like increase our renewal rate, or increase our adoption rate, or activation, or whatever your company tracks. And ultimately, if you're doing the job right and enabling them on the data and providing them the tools to have those better conversations, hopefully all of that will naturally go up and hit those KPIs that your goal is.
Sorry to interject. I think I'll give you a concrete example. Prior to Matik, I was at LinkedIn, where I was on a team called Insights, and our job was to basically put together narratives for our sales and customer success teams. And I'm a data nerd at heart, so I love a good visual. And I would come up with these like really cool like sand key charts, spider charts that I thought were amazing, and they looked really cool like on a slide or on a dashboard. But the way I knew that the team wasn't effectively enabled on it was I looked at usage, right? Like that's like the key. That was like the first thing, was just seeing how many people are using it. And then again, I would go and have some of these conversations to better understand, like, why aren't you guys using it? And they're like, Nik, like, I don't know what this thing is. I have no idea what the key takeaway is here. Like, I can't, you may explain it, but I myself am not able to go and explain this thing to a customer. And I think that is, again, both the barometer was whether or not they were using these tools and things that I was building. And the second was then following up and having a conversation to see, okay, why aren't you using it? And I realized, like, hey, the Sankey chart sounds cool and it looks cool on a dashboard or a slide, but explaining it, having the rep go and explain that to a customer is a lot more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah. Kate is in the audience and she says they were amazing, just so you know, Nik. All right. So you aren't alone, my friend.
That was good, Nik.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I'm getting a little excited just thinking about what those actually looked like. And I bet you they were pretty incredible. But that was in your past life, right? Today we're here to talk about what we're doing for folks now. And actually, so I guess on that note, we're talking about content that's in, content that's out. So let's move on to, again, nothing stays static, right? We're always creating new things, trying new things, at least we should be. When we look at maybe launching some new data-rich content like a Sankey chart that Nik was just alluding to, what's the enablement process there? Like, how should folks think about rolling out new things?
Yeah, I can start with this one. I think the first thing you want to think through is who is this data or this data rich content going to touch? Is it just CS? Is it CS and maybe sales might see it? You really want to create an org chart of who's going to be either seeing this data or have been talked to, or even on a meeting where you're talking about this data, because you don't want someone to be blindsided by it if it's going to be used in conversations and they don't have any clue what it is. So you first want to map out what that looks like. And then honestly, I really like a top and bottom approach. I want to make sure leadership is on board. And I also want to make sure that we've got like people on the ground, like a CSM power user group. Like we really want to make sure that they understand it, that leadership is, yes, this is definitely something we want to roll out. And then suddenly you've got it from both sides. And then as you start enabling it, and depending on what your company uses, we like to do office hours. We also like to post stuff in Slack. And we also like to make like little mini videos, digestible videos, like couple minutes worth of videos, something that someone's not gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is 30 minutes. I'm totally spacing out. So what we try to do is we give people a heads up. Hey guys, this is coming. We're gonna keep you updated as it's gonna become rolled out. So we're giving them a little heads up before it's completely launched. That way they don't feel blindsided. And then we set up office hours and we set up like a high spot page where there's really very digestible videos. And I also like doing that because what if they understand part of what you've shown, but not something else? I don't want them to have to walk through everything just to get to the piece that confused them. And then we've got this user group, right? This on the same level of everybody that you're launching it to that already really fully understands, and they can help answer questions potentially in the same language that the person's asking. And I say that because as an ops person, my brain works a little bit differently. I'm not customer facing per se. So I might explain something in a way that I'm like, that totally makes sense, but it might not make sense for the user asking the question. So having someone that is that person on like a power user group to be able to answer the question in the term, in the way that the person's asking it is, it's so vital. It really makes it, oh, that's what you mean. I'm over here like, why didn't you understand how I said it? Because I'm just viewing it so differently. So I know that's like a lot of different paths, but it's like top down and bottom up. Make sure you have it in digestible pieces. Make sure it doesn't come as a surprise, and make sure you have areas where they feel like they can look at it and really digest it piece by piece before they say they roll it out to a customer or something to that effect. That's how we look at it.
And how long does that, I don't know, call it that process? I'm thinking of if you're looking from maybe start to finish of that, Melissa, is that 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks? Like when you're, and I'm sure it depends on what you're actually launching, but if you just take a normal, I guess, item, folks be thinking about that with timing.
I would say if it's enough to really need a enablement process, probably 4 to 6 weeks, because we really want to make sure when we grab the power users, I also don't want to take up all of their time. Like they've got a ton of stuff to do. I don't want them to be like, hey, for the next 2 weeks, I need you like in this with me. I want to take an hour to a week max. They've got busy lives, busy things that they're doing. So if I can pull them away for just a little bit while working with leadership, also working on the content while we're building this out and having them look through things, it makes it a little bit more digestible versus really quick and dirty and throwing it at them. So that's why I would say like a 4 to 6 weeks, depending on what we're trying to enable on.
Yeah, I did make a little bit of a face when you said 8 weeks, because I am trying, in my world, trying to imagine saying to a stakeholder, enablement will be 8 weeks. I'd be like, what are you talking about? That's the whole project. We are fast moving over here at Mountain for sure. But yeah, I wanted to plus one something because I literally have it in bold, which is like the finding the CS expert, like finding that person on the team who is on the ground, who is running these QBRs too. They're the one who all the CSMs go to before they ever go to a manager. They're the one when they're sitting around and they're all just working, first person that gets DM'd for like, hey, what would you recommend that I do? Get that person on your team. Get that person trained up first. Make sure that person understands. Yeah, 100%. That's absolutely such a go-to move. In fact, that was like the first thing that I do if I started a new company is figure out who that person is, because I'm gonna bug you a lot. So just get ready for it. But I think one of the things that I wanted to add whenever I'm just approaching the enablement process from the very beginning is that I'm a big believer, and I'm sure people have said this before, but I'm a big believer that like enablement begins at ideation, that like I am imagining how I'm going to train users on something while I am creating the deck, while I am choosing the metrics, while I am developing this with an engineer, or if you've got a BI team, or whatever that might be, to make sure that I understand, one, why am I asking for this information? Making sure, did I get the right information from engineering? Like, you've got to keep that in mind the whole time, because if you aren't thinking about like the CSM perspective in all of this, you're going to get to the end and realize, oh, they have a ton of questions that I don't have answers for because I don't actually understand this from the necessity of what I need to be able to hand off. So for me, I also recommend ops, if you're able, obviously this is different for every organization, but if you can become a platform expert, it makes enablement also a lot easier because you understand from the back end what's coming from the data lake, what's the SQL query, right? Obviously, you're not going to enable your CSMs on those things, but like you understand how it corresponds to user behavior, how it corresponds to like what's happening in the platform, and being able to integrate that into the story when you are enabling is going to make it, they're going to take that on so much better, because you can't, if you get to a Zoom meeting and you're just pulling up numbers and you're just saying, cool, and then it's going to show logins and here's the number, and then it's going to show this, that just isn't going to go well and no one's going to remember it. But again, if you can be writing the story as you are developing these metrics and creating your deck and all of those types of things, they'll remember the story. And so they might have to go back and review documentation, or to Melissa's point, watch a Loom video that's 30 seconds long to remind themselves, like, what is this metric again? Or, oh, my deck says 5x efficiency. How did we get to that again? I just want to remind myself. They'll be able to find those things, but they'll remember the story. That's what needs to get in their body by time they are getting onto these calls with customers. And then just like very quickly, things that I'm same, always have Loom videos. I also always work with my CS leaders to record example talk tracks for every slide. So this is something that we started at my last company that worked extremely well. We had very smooth enablement and go live, because they could literally not only read a script that a CS leader had put together and see the definitions and all the different things, but then they could actually just hit play and just listen to an example of how you could talk about this slide and what that talk track would be. And they just felt way more successful when they then had to actually go and do it with the customer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nik.
I was going to say one tactical thing, I think, to Melissa's point about the top down, bottoms up. I love the concept of like tiger teams. Like no one likes to adopt something that they didn't have a say in. And so I think when you are creating this collateral, when you're creating these templates, you do want to have some people, some CSMs, or whether it's a power user or whatever, helping you craft these stories, because they are then hopefully going to be advocating to their teams to be using it. And nothing is better than having somebody say, hey, I used this last week and here's the recording. Like it went really well. It's going to adopt like wildfire. And I really like that concept that most of you mentioned about the top down. But top down, I think, is like table stakes. Like you need that in order to get the resources. But I think the bottoms up approach is like so crucial. And if you can have some people be a part of the journey of building out this content, and then better yet, advocating on your behalf to say, hey, I worked with Melissa on this, and I'm really excited for these templates or this particular piece of content. In fact, I actually used it last week with one of my customers, and here's an example. Here's a response that I got. I think that goes such a long way than just dumping it on the CSMs.
Yeah. And one last question before we roll off of this one, and Melissa or Emily, either of you can answer, but I'm just curious, do you have any recent, call it memories, of new content that you launched, and either like utter success stories or utter failures? And what did you learn from those? Either something that went really well or something that didn't, and then just any learnings on that.
So we launched this kind of upsell cross-sell process. And we thought it sounded really great, but we knew if we're going to really spread this out, because it's an extra process, it's an extra looking at data and suggesting that there could be a potential upsell cross-sell. So we talked with the sales team and said, hey, you might be getting like a notification. This is what this means. Is that okay with you? Trying to get a pulse on that. So we reached out to the people we knew it was going to impact. Then we already had buy-in from leadership because they're like, yes, this is amazing. So we put together this whole like enablement deck and talked through some of the CS leaders and said, hey, we think this is going to be a really good move, but what's your thoughts? And we made sure they were complete bought in. And then we met with the second level, like the regional manager side, and they're like, this is actually amazing. We feel like we're already doing it, but we don't know how to show it. So then we made it as easy as possible. We had screenshots, we had those little Loom videos, like something super, super simple. And we also tried, they could see that we tried to really minimize the additional work. So I think when they see that we want to launch something, but we're doing everything we can to like make sure that we're not changing too much of their everyday flow, they automatically get a little bit more bought in because they feel like they're seen, they feel like they're heard, and that we're not just trying to throw something else on them. And then we launched it. We basically had a successful conversation with sales, successful conversation with the CS leaders and the regional managers. They launched it to their team and said, hey, no stress, but this is what we're going to try to do. And we're going to see how it does. So it was almost like they could opt in to do it. And because it was almost like a choice, they were actually like, oh, this actually looks pretty cool. It's going to show what I'm already doing, but in a reportable way, almost giving it, not that I'm saying everything should be a choice, but letting them feel like they're buying in on their own accord versus being forced to do something. That really helped our enablement. And it took about almost a month because we were launching it over a quarter. And man, after that month, people are like, this is awesome. We can now track what I've already been doing. And it actually was just like this validating helpfulness that really actually brought the whole, like our APJ team together about it. So I feel like we really nailed it because we made it more about the CSM being and people being shown what they're already doing, minimize their level of effort, but also then brought the sales in and said, hey, this is only going to help you. It's not going to hinder you. You don't have to do anything extra. It's just bringing something to your attention. So everybody felt like they were getting something out of it without really having to do anything. And so with that, and then the videos and having materials everywhere in case they needed it, it just was a really successful launch.
That's awesome. Emily, any stories on your end?
Yeah, I think the one that sticks out to me at the first company where I actually was in charge and did operations and all of that kind of stuff, we did release a one-sheeter and we were not set up for scale. Like we didn't have a digital model. We were not at that maturity yet, but we had a tier of customers that didn't have a CSM. And as you can imagine, their retention rates were much lower than the people who had CSMs. And so we needed something. We needed a way to not put a lot of lift on our CSMs, but also try to get some engagement from these customers because we were just bleeding revenue in the lower tiers. And so we put together what was essentially a one-page version of our QBR. So we weren't necessarily like reinventing the wheel. It was just like putting it into one sheet that was, you want to talk about a very different kind of enablement, which is making sure that a customer understands it without needing to be on a call with a person explaining what the definition is. That's a whole different kind of enablement brain.
The ultimate test right there.
Exactly, yeah. And so what we did is we just started once a quarter. We would just send out these, we'd generate them and we would send them out to the lower tier customers. And it was so cool to see engagement in the platform start really picking up with these, that they'd reach out to support with specific questions about, hey, I got this one sheet, or sometimes it was a decision maker who's not a user. And they're like, you just sent me a thing that says that I have no active users in the platform. And you're like, correct. How can we help with this? Like it was literally even what would look bad, right? Of sending something to someone who's paying $10,000 a month and being like, nobody's using this. It was great because suddenly we had a decision maker who was bought in, who was like, what can I do? How can I get involved? And like working with our support team. And it was launching these great conversations for our like round robin team. And I don't have any like exact numbers, but more from just like that high level perspective. We just got a lot of engagement from customers who were previously dark.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you all shared some stories of some of those new initiatives, right? That we can launch, the things that you can learn from those things. So once you get past that initial launch phase, the work's not done, right? You still got to keep doing the thing, right? And maybe you've made some changes along the way. Maybe you haven't, but right, like launch is just that, it's launch, right? And then you got to keep everything rolling. So, how do you actually do that? How do you continue with enablement successfully, kind of post launch? And I think, Emily, you're going to get us started on this one.
Yeah, honestly, it's very similar to a couple of things that Melissa was talking about earlier, which is surface. Like I'm a huge fan of Gong. There are lots of tools that do this. It does not matter what call software you're using, but I will go and listen to just that section of the call. And if I find really great examples, grabbing that snippet from the call and sending it out, giving kudos to those people. If you're using a more formalized version, sending them like swag, sending them something to like get them excited and to let other people actually like view that and be like, oh, I've been really struggling with like how to talk about. For some reason, I always struggle when I get to that slide, but that makes total sense to me, and letting them learn from each other. I am also something that I set up at every company that I work at is I call them ask channels. Essentially, it is a channel where the people posting and the audience is all just CS. It's a place for them to ask questions to each other, but I'm in the channel. So one of the things that I always monitor it, I try not to jump in too much, but if I see consistent questions, okay, I need to update the FAQs, or my documentation isn't clear enough. I need to bring that into my documentation so we get this question less. It's also a really great way for, again, them to just help each other. And then to Nik's point, see ideas for like, oh, interesting, like you're almost renaming the metric when you talk about it. Why don't we just put that on the slide? That makes way more sense in the way that you're describing that. So I think that like having a channel that allows them to feel like they can talk to each other very easily, but also allows you as an ops person to creepily watch and get those questions is really helpful. And then also, Melissa brought it up, I am a big fan of office hours and having a time and place when they can come to you and ask those questions. I also, as a part of all of these things, really believe that you do better as an ops manager the more that CS views you as a part of their team. Even if you roll up to a RevOps organization or an operations organization, that like if they feel like you are a team member of CS, they are going to trust you. They're going to come to you. They're going to ask you questions. And then, of course, it's your responsibility to learn from every question that is asked of you, right? If I am hearing a bunch of questions and then I do enablement again for a new thing and I don't learn from any of the like gaps that I had in my previous enablement, like that's going to get exhausting for the team after a while. Yeah, that's where I would start.
I love that. I love the partnership piece too, where my team is very like, granted, we roll up to this business operations and that's amazing, but the people we support, the people we talk to daily, they're our people. They're the people we're there to support. And we totally want to be like someone on their team. They know that we've got their back. Their needs are what our focus is, not like we're on a separate team. So that's been a huge thing for my team as a CS ops group, especially with like our digital focus. My digital growth person Elizabeth is completely like on their team basically, because she's in all the meetings, she's making sure she's like supporting. She comes back to our ops and is okay, how can we strategize a better way for something? Because it really, to your point, Emily, it really makes you so much more of a partner when you're constantly in there and you see their pains and you're trying to see what we can do to optimize efficiencies on those teams and looking for different ways to make sure we can support them in a really good manner. So I absolutely love that you said that. I love the ask channels. We have a handful of those and they're huge, right? That's how you can see where the pain points are, because people don't always think to come to ops and say, hey, I'm having an issue with this. But as the conversations go through, you can pull out some of those needs and try to get ahead of them before they become actual problems. Something else my team does is we do own the Gainsight tool and we do support that. So we have these like Gainsight office hours, but what we also talk about is anything else we've seen as a pain point. So every quarter we release The More You Know newsletter. And it includes Gainsight highlights or ops highlights or things that we've heard in the last quarter, or to re-enable things that may not have stuck Or if we start seeing adoption on things that we thought we've enabled on in the past, we reiterate that in the newsletter. We also have a lot of our digital growth and automation on decks and QBR updates in that same newsletter. And then we do 2 office hours to cover every single time zone that we can. So every quarter we do this. And sometimes people come and ask us about the newsletter, and sometimes they come and just ask us about a lot of other stuff because they know they can. They know it's a safe space that they can ask questions. And if we don't know it, we always try to find the right person so we can go back and answer. So I think having that constant engagement and honestly, you do have to check on adoption of certain key things. Are they using the Matik decks? Are they using Gainsight? Are they using all the tools you think they should? So that way you know what you need to reiterate on in some of these newsletters. But I think that constant engagement and partnership makes this really solid relationship and helps you with these enablements.
I want to add one tactical thing to the ask questions. If you want to go like real pro level, do a workflow a way for them so that they can't actually message in Slack. They have to use the workflow to post the question. Because if you use a flow, you can export every question that's been asked. And then you can actually do like your own analysis and build. It's so funny, Melissa, you talking about more you know. I had a Notion page called The More You Know that was literally like the top questions that have been asked, the top like changes to things. That's also just a great way to make sure that it's just that things don't just get lost in a channel.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, that's great. I think the main thing that I heard across all of those examples was engagement, right? Call it passive and active engagement, but I think that's the key to making sure that things are successful in a post-launch sort of world. And we've got about 8 minutes left, so I guess we'll start wrapping up on this topic, which is we've gone through a lot in terms of why is CS team data enablement important? How do you identify where it's needed? How do you measure the outcomes and the success? How do you know if teams have effectively been enabled? How do you continue enablement post-launch? And to sum it all up, I know I've asked y'all for some stories and stuff already, but maybe we can go around the horn a little bit and just talk about what are the most effective kind of tactics that you've seen work personally? And then also the flip side, if there's things that you've tried maybe once, maybe multiple times that just haven't worked, what are some of those things as well? Like what are the must-dos, the effective things that you've learned so far in your career? And what are the don't-dos, right? The things where it's like, I've tried that, avoid this mistake, don't do that thing.
I can go. So I think the most effective, I know we already talked about top down and bottom up, definitely think that's huge. Having that primary user or that tiger team, also, I feel like that's huge. Depending on what you're trying to enable them on, making them do something with it, and almost like little mini quizzes, or hey, this is the situation, how would you handle it? And then like getting them to think helps them absorb it. We have our data team we have different data definitions, and sometimes it's easy to forget what the definition of certain SKUs are. We have these little quizzes where this is how we track this, what's the answer to how you would talk about this, and then they actually have to like click on something and then it tells them the answer. But I know that sounds silly, but when you're really trying to tell that data story, if you don't know how to answer these questions, you wouldn't be able to tell that story correctly in like a QBR. So giving them these little kind of like, you got to think type of quizzes, it makes them really engaged in it and not just reading a data doc where they're not going to absorb half of it. So I feel like having the buy-in, the team that's helping and having influence, and then actually during the enablement process, getting people to think and engage while you're trying to enable them. I think those are the most effective tactics that I have seen for sure.
I would say +1. Honestly, I think the tiger team bottoms up, that's my favorite. I really do think that whenever you are trying to launch something that's like a data asset or a piece of collateral, having people that are on the front lines be a part of the process and having them deliver the message for you, I think is by far the most effective way to get something adopted. Again, I go back to the earlier example where if you can have that power user during the kickoff or during the training session, like literally tell the team, hey, Emily and I have been working with Nik and we're really pumped about this new renewal template. We used it last week, here's success. I think that is really big. The second learning that I've had is that you need to have a multi-pronged approach. It's not just like a one size fits all. And I think that's a common theme that across both of the responses from Melissa and Emily, where you got to go via Slack, you got to do video, you got to do trainings, right? The more you do that, I think the better holistic opportunity you have. And then last but not least, I think there is something around incentives, monetary incentives. And I think this is where you need to partner up with the leadership to be able to be like, hey, if this is a big objective of ours is to drive down churn and we are launching these assets and we're enabling the team, can we have some sort of a spiff that really encourages people to do that? I think those things do go a long way. At the end of the day, I think there are a lot of people that are client facing that do. Obviously, monetary is a big part of their comps. Having some sort of a spiff can go a long way.
Yeah, and I'll just add really briefly to the ask difficult questions. Make the quizzes hard. Don't be asking questions that are, did you read it? Make them struggle with that question a little bit, because as painful as that will feel to them when they're taking the training, like I've used an LMS before, I've used like, this can be wherever, whatever tool you have. But if you ask them easy questions, it's sure like checkbox, they did it, but like you have no idea if they actually know it. But when it's really difficult, so one example is one troubleshooting of like you create the deck and the information is either blank or it like doesn't have anything. What are you checking? What do you do next? How are you troubleshooting this? Making sure that they know how to like, oh, I had the wrong platform ID in Salesforce. And so it was connecting to the wrong account, right? There's so many different ways to like make sure that they also understand how to troubleshoot. But then also we would always have them, especially when we were rolling out a large amount of data, they would have to record a sample QBR. They would have to run a deck for their customer, record themselves doing the call, and then it would get graded because we wanted to see, do you understand this? And we would actually provide examples. Hey, if you have a customer who has this type of metric, what would you say to them? What recommendation? How does this impact their outcomes that they're working towards? So I think just don't be afraid to make training difficult. They won't be super happy when you roll it out the first time, but they will be happy when they get to the actual first call with their customer and they aren't panicking about, oh man, I have to do this new slide for the first time and I've never had to do it before.
There you go. Consider this your permission slip to make it hard, per Emily and Melissa. I love it. Yeah, I think the big thing, the theme there I heard was call it role playing, right? Whether it's through practice QBRs that you have to record, like Emily mentioned, quizzes, trainings with hard questions, as y'all both mentioned, makes a lot of sense. And so with that, we can go ahead and wrap up because we're right about time. I want to give a big thank you to Nik, Melissa, and Emily. Thank you for being with us for the last hour or so, dropping some knowledge. Really appreciate it. For everyone who is still on the call, when you log off, you'll get prompted with a 2-question survey about feedback and stuff from the session today. Please fill that out. It'll take you a few seconds, and we value all the feedback that we can get. But with that, I will let you all run. So have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the flip side. So take it easy, everybody. Peace.